Okay, let's wait a minute or two for people to up. Hey, Luigi. All right, I guess we can go ahead and get started. All right, just a few announcements. So Sophia has volunteered to be the bug deputy, so a little later she's got her first report together. Thanks for taking that on. I think it's been kind of helpful to have the bug reviews at the meetings, so that's good. So thanks. And then the other thing is the mid-cycle is in 2 weeks, so I'll put the poll about the day and time out later today. And then we should know by the next meeting when it will be scheduled. I think I asked last time if there were any events happening during the week. Nobody said anything, so I'm assuming that's still the case. So hopefully it'll be a quick and easy poll, and I forgot to enter that. Okay. And I think that's it. The lower constraints business is still going on. I think there's going to be like the final round of discussion at the TC meeting tomorrow, I believe. What it's looking like is, well, I haven't gone back and looked at the latest in that thread, but the last I heard, it was looking like we're going to keep the lower constraints job, but only for direct dependencies, because it is kind of helpful to have it there so that, well, it detects, well, I forget why it was helpful. It seemed like at the time, like it was a real helpful thing. So anyway, so we'll probably keep it, but it's going to be reduced to not include the indirect dependencies, and we'll see what happens there. I think we're mostly under control. I did put up some new patches for cinderlib, because by the time we got to train, everything was fine in cinderlib till we got to train, and then a couple of things broke. And then I realized what's happening is cinderlib's in the stable branches is still using master for cinder and brick. And so anyway, there are patches up in cinderlib if you're interested in this kind of thing. I know Gorka is, because that's his job. Take a look and make sure they make sense. But I think what we're doing is we've got a pin. So Cinder itself is not in upper constraints because none of the OpenStack projects are. So we have to, since cinderlib is on the release model where it has stable branches, we need to pin what version of Cinder it uses. And we also need to do the same thing for brick, although brick isn't upper constraints. But at the same time, we do want to use master brick and cinder in cinderlib master because we want to be able to react immediately to changes in cinder and brick. But the problem is, since cinderlib is a cycle trailing thing, there's a time where cinder has gone on. So like right now, cinder is doing whatever release or Wallaby development, and up until last week, cinderlib was still doing Victoria. So anyway, I think I've got that figured out. There's a patch up to cinderlib to update the documentation so that we know to do this. Basically, when the coordinated release happens, you got to make a change to cinderlib, And then you got to make another manual change to cinderlib after the release. So there's probably a better way to do that, and hopefully somebody will determine it. But anyway, if you're interested, go look at the open reviews for cinderlib and, you know, leave comments or expressions of disgust or whatever. And I think that's it. All right, so the big thing on everybody's minds are the new drivers. So let's spend some time looking at what the situation is, because it's still moving along very slowly. So let me update the update it, why not? Okay. Right. Oh yeah, so there's an email to the mailing list. I was looking this morning, there have been a bunch of updates on drivers. Oh good, and Walt's here. Right, so what do we got? All right, so the S3 backup driver. All right, so hopefully you've got your IRC open because I'm putting the notes in there as we're going. Yeah, it might be nice to, all right, let's be nice to Lance. Okay. Orca suggests since Lance is a visitor and has other things to do, we should probably take his topic first. So Lance, do you mind?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, cool. All right. Let me untopic that. Okay, Lance, go ahead.
Sure. Full disclosure, I have no problem hanging out with you guys during the Cinder meeting. Oh, I just had to say it.
We missed you, Lance.
Yeah. All right. So I spent some time over the last week kind of digging into various proposals for how we can do RBAC testing in Cinder. And I have 3 that I've done so far, and I kind of want to get some feedback on the approach, kind of see what people think of the various pros and cons of each, and then I can pick that back up and keep moving it forward. So the first one is implementing tests using DDT and NoAuth middleware. This would require some changes into how NoAuth middleware is opinionated about building context objects for Cinder, because it sets like the user, the project, it says is admin true on the context object, and then it sets that in the request and just kind of passes it along. And a lot of the default policies just kind of work with that. So there isn't really any issues with people using Cinder in standalone deployments because it just kind of has this pretty generic context object. So I took a stab at trying to make NoAuth middleware less opinionated about that. So that instead it would really just kind of populate the entire request context from the request environment. So this would allow us to set the properties that we need to in our DDT testing and pass them in as request headers, and then the context just reinflates it from that. So we wouldn't really have anything to kind of pulling the token apart and having one piece of the token be the user, one piece be the project, and so on and so forth. So that's one approach. Advantages to that approach is that it's consistent with how some of the other services are doing it. And we're also testing that Oslo context is in the mix and that we're reinflating objects using Oslo context implementations. It also doesn't require us to mock Keystone middleware. So we don't need to know any of the internal details about how Keystone middleware processes requests in order to actually implement protection testing in Cinder, which could be a benefit. The second approach is using a very similar technique, but instead of using no auth middleware, I'm setting the auth strategy to Keystone. And this is where the mocking comes into play. The tests look very similar. It essentially does the same thing with the request headers, and it just populates that into a context object. But we do have to mock how Keystone middleware processes requests to kind of bypass any of that so that we're not introducing a dependency on Keystone for Cinder's functional tests. So this is pretty much has the same benefits as the previous approach. I'm not sure how people feel about mocking Keystone middleware in functional tests, and it might also require some changes to the client that Cinder maintains for functional testing. I think that client kind of assumes to be called with no auth, and it just kind of works that way. So if we wanted to reuse a lot of those like really useful test utilities for creating volumes and polling until a volume is created, I think we'll have to expose how the auth strategy is invoked from the client somehow, or maybe kind of like rethink how that works. I took a stab at it and I didn't really get very far, but it just might require some massaging of how we deal with authentication in Cinder's functional client. And then the third approach is to elaborate on the existing unit test coverage that Cinder has. So there's a whole bunch of tests that already exist in Cinder test unit policies, I think. And they pretty much just mock the context object and replace it with one that we want to use for the request. The good thing is that a lot of the plumbing exists. It's already used. The downside is that depending on how you do the mocking for various Cinder subsystems and the context object itself, you might not get the same behavior as you would interacting with Cinder in a real deployment. And I discovered this yesterday when I was doing some testing to make sure that users within one project can't get volumes in another, and I kind of freaked out for a second because I thought I just discovered like a vulnerability, but it wasn't. Like Cinder is actually doing the right thing when it's deployed. It's how I was doing the mocking to try and make it so that Cinder didn't have to rely on a backend, but at the same time it was mucking with how I was implementing the protection test. So pros, it's already there. It's something that we can just kind of iterate on. Cons is that it might be a little bit more finicky with how we have to actually set up the mocking, things that we just might need to be aware of, or gotchas as far as how the testing is concerned. Does anybody have any comments, questions, suggestions, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, the tests that are already there, I mean, I think they're good and we should keep them, but I think they're aimed at something slightly different. So, and that's why you're finding this weird result when you're actually trying to use it. So, I mean, so my intuition anyway is that when we had just the basic two categories of admin and user, that was sufficient. But with all the personas we're trying to support with this new effort, and when I say new, it's been in Keystone, since like Queens or something. Yeah, it's just, I think it would be better to not rely on mocking and unit type tests, but to move to the functional stuff. So that's going to cause a problem because we're going to have to make some adjustments. But I think that's my intuition anyway, is we should keep it on the functional side. Just because we've got possibly 9. Keystone now has 9 personas. We're proposing to implement like 5, but still, that's a lot more than 2, especially when you multiply it by, we've got like, I don't know, 80 policies. So that's a lot of stuff. So I think we'd be better off, and I will shut up, because that's my point. Okay.
One other useful bit that actually just happened, Tempest merged all of the underlying plumbing to set up clients for Tempest. So as far as how I understand it, the test cases have the 9 various clients exposed to them. So you can do something like, self OS system admin dot volume create, right? And that will automatically use the system administrator clients that Tempest implements. So those are in Tempest now. If the previous 3 approaches are too much refactoring, or too much of a rewrite, or too much plumbing to implement something new from a functional testing perspective, we could revisit the writing stuff in Tempest approach too, if that seems to be easier, and obviously isn't susceptible to the mocking concerns that Brian shares. But that underlying tool set is available, and I think it landed within the last couple of days. So eventually we always kind of talked about how this would be like a Tempest approach is kind of the right approach for something like this. But we're also, weren't quite sure when all of that plumbing would land. So that's another option that's probably on the table now that stuff is at least merged.
So we could do something like have add a RBAC job and just do the subset of Tempest tests, I guess. That would, man.
Or we could add it to the Cinder Tempest plugin instead of Tempest itself, which so that other projects don't need to run this.
Right. Yeah, that would be much better.
That's exactly what we did in Keystone. We used our own Tempest plugin, and we put it all there. And that seemed to work out pretty well.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of running it in Tempest, because then we are not mocking anything, we are not changing anything, we are testing what we normally test. But if that turns out to be too much of a problem, I would say I like the changes to the standalone one best of the 3 approaches, because we are not mocking as much, basically.
Okay.
I guess.
So preferred would be Tempest plugin. Second preferred would be evolving no-auth middleware to be less opinionated about authentication, and then using that for protection testing.
For me, yes. I don't know the rest.
No, I think that makes sense. So with the Tempest, so these, I guess I'm thinking that the policies aren't going to change very much, but if the code underneath them does, we still need to test them all the time. So, okay. Just wondering how long the Cinder Tempest plugin, I guess most of the time is spent in setting that thing up anyway, right? So it's like 40 minutes of setup, and then it runs like 3 minutes of tests.
Yeah, and most of the tests are not going to be, we can try to minimize what they have to actually do. Mm-hmm. For example, when you make the calls, in most cases, it's just going to be, can I start doing it? Can I not? The problem I think we may have with things like migration and stuff like that, which can turn out to be longer operations.
Right.
But for most of them, they shouldn't be slow operations tests, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Anyone else have a? All right. Let me put this in the minutes. That. Okay. All right. So, everybody, please think about it. Um, yeah. I guess Lance, can you slap together a quick test just of like one API call for Tempest so we can see what we're dealing with? Um, that'd be great.
Yeah, I
And then
can.
we'll have something we can look at. I mean, the Tempest option is it's real life checking. So, um, we're getting exactly what the deployer is going to see. So that's pretty nice. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, I can do that. I'll see if I can get something up by the end of the day.
Okay.
And then we can.
We're about to discuss the new drivers. So we're all, our review time's taken up. So don't feel like you've got to do it immediately. But I don't want to
Okay.
slow you down either. All right. Thanks a lot, Lance. Any questions for Lance while he's here?
Yep, I have one question regarding your latest email to the mail list. Just a single question on whether the reader should be able to see the sensible data that the user could see. Did you remember Erno mentioned a specific case where a user could have, for example, some serial number or something like that, or license key, whatever, and he thought, and I agree, that the reader should not be able to see that information. But in your email, you mentioned something in the TLDR as that the reader should not um, protect sensible data or something like that. And I think that would contradict at least what we discussed in one of the meetings, where we said that that the reader could be more restrictive than the user, and therefore you may not be able to see some sensitive data that the user can see. In this case, these licenses or something like that.
Okay. So is the question where we stand now with regard to the reader role?
Yes.
So where we kind of ended up with that was we should treat reader as like the person that you trust the least within your deployment. So if there's anything that Cinder considers sensitive, you would not expose that to somebody with the reader permissions because the reader role is inherently like implied when somebody has a role assignment anywhere in the default role chain, right? So anybody with member is ultimately the reader on any of their role assignments or any of the targets of their role assignments. So that being said, the way that we kind of tried to fix that was by saying if there's anything sensitive, don't expose it to them. Instead, keep it at an elevated privilege, whether that be member or admin. And then in a release or two, Keystone will add formal support for an auditor role that will imply reader. And then once that's
That's
done.
Yeah, that's what I gathered from your from the email and from the meetings. But within the TLDR, it said, let's see, OpenStack services implementing secure RBAC should update default policies with the reader role in a consistent manner where it is not meant to protect sensitive information. And I replied saying, shouldn't it say where it is meant to protect sensitive information? Because protect as in hide. Or am I understanding it incorrectly?
No, I think you're understanding it correctly, and that was probably a wording issue on my end. So, yeah, I think how you're interpreting that is correct. I can update that wording so that it says, do not expose sensitive information to somebody with the reader role. Would reversing that help?
Yeah, that could be fantastic. Yeah, because I got confused. The TLDR sounded one way, then I read the whole email. It sounded like the opposite. Yep.
Okay, I will fix that. I did propose one patch to Keystone's documentation that kind of tries to formalize this because we define the role as one of our defaults. So I tried to clarify that documentation that says like this is what it's supposed to be used for, and hopefully it came across there more clear than it did in the email. But I will update that email too. I'm sorry, I didn't see that you had replied. So I will go read that and then fix it. But yeah, I think the way that you're interpreting it or the way that you're describing it makes sense, and I think that's ultimately where we ended up.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Good catch.
All right, thanks. Anything else for Lance? All right, Lance, feel free to stick around, but also feel free to disappear if you want. Okay, new drivers. All right, so the merge deadline was Thursday last week, and we agreed at the last meeting for extensions, and I'm trying to find the link here. Okay, so the first one up there is the S3. And that one, so Gorka had done a big review, and the author has made, I think, all of the updates that Gorka requested. So I looked at that this morning, and as far as I can tell, it's looking fine. Now it's passing Zool, so all the unit tests are correct, but I don't think the experimental Zool job is passing unless I'm missing something. So what we had said last week was that we wanted to get the code in shape, but we also need some kind of confirmation that this thing actually works, either by somebody deploying it manually or by getting the job working. I noticed Luigi had left some comments on the where is it? There's another patch to add the job. Experimental job for S3 backup driver, but I don't think it's.
I'll do another review for the latest code.
Okay.
I think my latest review was with downvolt.
Oh, okay.
And I can take another look through it too. I think they'd previously addressed my issues, but
Yeah, so nobody's here who's actually working on this. I think it's somebody in Japan, so we've got a time zone
right.
problem. All right, let me shoot him an email. I mean, Gorka, my feeling is this thing looks close. I
Yep.
wouldn't want to postpone it necessarily, but it would be good to have evidence that it actually works. All right, let me I'll send something to the mailing list. Just requesting. All right, so initially, I think that email says something like it needs to be ready tomorrow. Well, I'll put something in the email. Let's see. Let's see what happens.
So the sticking point at this point is if there's not a CI for it, and it needs to be done through Zool.
Well, so we haven't required backup drivers to have.
Oh, that's right. This is a
Yeah.
backup.
So, but I don't know that. I'll make my request clear. So having the CI set up would be an easy way for them to show that this thing works, which would be great, and it would give us a CI job, which is nice for ongoing detection of problems. But alternatively, it would be good to have like logs from a
Right.
Tempest run where this thing's configured. So I'll make that explicit in the email, and then hopefully they can address it fairly quickly. I mean, presumably
Okay.
the guy who's developing this has a setup and has been, actually connecting.
Testing it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I mean, it wouldn't be fair to add that requirement because we've had this discussion in the past and it's, it hasn't been added as a requirement. So I think it's fair to ask for proof that it runs
Mhm.
and wait for that. And then, go from there, but not reject it at this point.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So
Okay.
let's see, maybe they can respond really quickly and we won't have to give an extension. Otherwise, unless, I think that the code looks good, unless right, they can't get it to pass because there's a problem, then of course we shouldn't merge it anyway.
I think we should just, in terms of asking logs or asking for the CI, like you said, having the CI would be fantastic
Yeah,
and a way to ensure that it's there. But I could really accept just the coder's word that this works. Because I
okay.
think that's basically what we did with GCS. In that case, I think I even tested it, but
Mhm.
it's basically somebody saying, yeah, I have tested it, and at least it works for me.
Okay. All right, let me put it that way, and then I'll encourage him to, work on the CI since they have it. Somebody's been working on it, and they have something running. So, okay. All right, let's do it that way. That sounds fair.
Okay.
All right, great. Next one is I'm not sure how to even say this for you. Okay, that one has merged. So we don't need to. There's some follow-up that there's a patch, so look for that. I think it was documentation maybe, and it's that get drivers thing that we need for cinderlib and Ember CSI. But otherwise, the CI is running. and they've committed to, it hasn't been responding reliably, but they've committed to getting that working, and they've been pretty good about responding to things. So I feel okay about that. All right. Next one is Waltz driver. I guess I shouldn't call it Waltz driver, but I guess it really is. Okay. Yeah, let's take a look. Now, I think the CI is passing for this now. So that's great. So,
Yep.
All right, I'm getting slowness with Garrett. Now, I've got the paperwork. I guess I'll send something to ML. Walter, are you on the call or is he just in IRC?
He's shy.
Yeah, let me.
Oh, I see. He's just in IRC. He's avoiding us.
Yeah, you may be wondering why the meeting is so nobody's talking. Where's the connection info?
I noted that there isn't really much documentation going with this, which is a bummer. But so I'm going to sound two-faced here, but this has been wanted by enough people that I think it would be good to get it in, and if we can add documentation later, that would be good.
Hey guys,
Hey,
I missed the the link for the video.
Whoa.
Well,
Hey.
good to see you. All right, so it's looking good. So you just pushed the new patch set, and the CI is passing, so that's cool too. Yeah, I think the documentation we could do as a follow-up. I think there are probably a few things that need to be pointed out about deploying it. And then the other thing is I've got the initial patches up to move your the RBD iSCSI client to
Okay, great.
Cinder. I'll have to go back and see. I've got them up, but there's going to be some kind. I've seen this happen before, but I can't remember how they fixed it. There'll be some kind of weirdness because you own the PyPy. So I don't know whether they need your key or what. But I should have done this yesterday. I'll put a note to the mailing list just saying that that's there so everybody's aware. And if you could just go and look at it and just put a +1 saying you're okay with this, so it's not like we're just stealing your stuff.
Yeah, whatever I can do to help.
All right, cool. And then so that'll be good. Okay, so right, so it looks like the Ceph iSCSI is pretty close to completion. So I've reviewed it. Jay's reviewed it. I'll go back and look at the comments. Anyone else who's got an interest, please take a look. It's a fairly straightforward driver, and you did a nice job, right, making a subclass of the RBD driver. So it's got the support of all the current tests and stuff that we've got for that. So that's cool. All right, great. So I think we're what did I say in the email about that? So I think so it's got the running CI. So that's
So there, along those lines, there are several other patches that are related to DevStack and the DevStack Ceph plugin that need reviews. Those all need to land too for this whole end-to-end process to work correctly.
Okay.
So we need reviews on those as well to get that stuff to land.
Okay, great. So as soon as we got we'll take a look at the next one. As soon as we got at least 1+2 on the current patch, I'll go +1 those other ones and try to poke people to take a look.
Okay.
Because once they know we're serious about merging this thing, I think it focuses their attention.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
That's great. Okay.
Thanks, Walt.
Yep.
So, all right. So the email says 5th of February. So we're cool. That's next week. All right, great. All right, so we should be able to get this done. So that's fantastic. Okay, and then the final one is Kioxia. I don't know if there's anybody from Kioxia here.
Hi, yes, Zor here from Kioxia.
Oh, hi, Sar. Great. Okay. All right, so let's take a. I haven't looked at this in the last couple of days. So, what can you give a quick status of the CI situation, Zohar?
Yeah, so CI is pretty bare bones. It's not completely stable. And when it has a stack SH failure, it often it might hang in that process, or it might not publish a result. So it's not perfect. It's very simple, but I'm working on improving it. Both about stability and robustness. It has been posting results for a while.
Okay.
So, yep.
All right, so I'm just in the IRC meeting, I just put the links. So there are three parts to this one. There's the Cinder driver and then the two brick components.
So I want to mention the required component is the connector component. So especially from discussion for the spec for the agent, which is the third component there, we can view it as optional, even though it's definitely recommended, and we might do some turnaround about its architecture. The quicker we can get comments, the better, and such. I know we probably are missing some implementation between the spec and the actual state of the code right now on that third patch set.
Okay.
But we basically, depending on final decisions that are made, I mean, we can go deeper into technical discussion here of the, of the specifics, but we're doing our best right now too. So currently we're also implementing another part of it. We're trying to make it act, if you are aware of the details, is act like prefsep when it does the spinning of the agent, because the code actually lives in OS Brick, but it actually should be a process, a recurring process that is either a thread or an independent process. And that's kind of where the whole architectural discussion is around. So for now, we could keep it as a thread maybe, or if we can get a best solution quickly, then maybe we'll do it that way. And then definitely it will change over time, especially the way it fits into OpenStack, because right now it does kind of feel like it's a little bit shoved by force, this whole agent, right, that third patch set into the OS Brick. But it's, there's definitely room for it to evolve from there. But the first two components are really what's the most important. So we did a lot of work on the driver. I think the driver, for the most part, it has very good unit test coverage. It's passing the CIs. We have our CI. It's not perfect, but if we get some feedback on it, we'll also know which parts of it to focus on. And the connector, we definitely need more feedback on that. Like it is working for us. We're having all sorts of QA cycles with it. We have our own internal CI that's working fine. It definitely can be still improved, and we definitely just want some people to take a look.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, that helps prioritize it. All right, so the things we need to focus on are the Cinder driver and then the first brick patch to the connector. That's good. And then the agent stuff can be followed up once we have the other things going. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Good. Thanks. And I'll review that today or tomorrow. I guess today-ish. And then anyone else who has time. So it looks like Walt's stuff is pretty much done. So now we can focus on this last one. And then Yvonne mentioned there's another driver actually that's sort of out there, but it's really small. It's the iSCSI driver for, is it HP? let me go look in the Cinder channel.
Yes, it's HP, something for HP.
Okay. So I think like we should just go ahead. It's been sort of presented as just a feature, but I mean, technically it's a new driver, but the amount of code
Yes.
is like extremely tiny. I wish they'd mentioned it because I've been sending out the things. I missed this in the discussion that this driver was up for review, and they've just been patiently sitting there waiting since like September. So anyway, if people please take a look, I guess let me get the link. My feeling, it's actually got 2+2s on it already. So I think, and I think Yvonne's question was just, should we merge it or not? It's got CI coverage. It's really tiny. So I'm thinking, let's just go ahead and do it.
Yeah, this was my question.
Yeah.
Where's the link for that?
Yeah, let me get the link, and then
Okay.
if anyone objects, please leave a comment. I think.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it since I'm familiar with the HP stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be good. Oh.
Actually, there's no code. There's no new code. Just drops not supported exceptions, that's all.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, it's a really tiny code change.
yeah.
So I mean,
But
technically,
it's
yeah.
more. It's not technical question. It's more question: is it driver or a feature? So because we missed driver deadline
Right.
with several exceptions, and should we approve it or not? That's why I hold my approve vote.
Yeah, it looks like they're just disabling the failure detection on the new hardware, even though it's the same operating system, the same tool chain, everything, just on a new model.
Yeah. And if it's passing CI,
Yeah.
and if we missed it from a review standpoint, I don't know. I guess you could argue that they should have raised it up as it being a new driver, but it doesn't look like they were being malicious here. So
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
they were just thinking of it as you just needed to flip the switch and everything
Yeah.
works. So I think
My concern here is how come when the driver was initially added, the Primera support, they explicitly said it doesn't support iSCSI, the Cinder driver. And now they haven't added any code, and suddenly it supports it?
That's most likely because they had to get the REST API working on the actual storage platform itself.
Ooh,
I
okay.
went through this process with them on a couple hardware revs when I was working at HP to ensure that the actual REST API on the storage platform worked and was the
Then
same version and all that.
Yeah, in that case, I'm okay to merge it, but I will ask them to, on the release note, to mention either the firmware version, something that tells people when it is available. Otherwise, it's going to be a nightmare. People trying to figure out why it's supported, but it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable.
yeah, it seems like there should at least be a documentation change here.
But I'm okay with an exception and merging it and everything because, yeah, there's no real code changes here.
okay, that sounds good. Yeah, you're right. They need to call out exactly under what conditions you will know that this thing would work. Okay. All right, all right, so I think the Walt iSCSI driver, we should be able to finish that up within the next day or so. And then we can concentrate on the two Kioxia reviews. And then that'll be the new drivers for Wallaby. All right, Yvonne, thanks for bringing this one up because I had completely missed it.
Yeah.
Me too. I just was pinged.
Mhm.
Just asked to review, and
Yeah.
it was not obvious approve or not.
So I quickly looked over the Kioxia OS changes, and there's a lot of changes in the NVMe base connector, and that kind of concerns me because do we have anywhere where that's actually being tested in a CI?
Yes. So
Their CI.
the Kioxia CI is running with it. So the backend, the Kumu-scale backend, is an NVMe protocol serving backend that talks the Cinder driver interface. So it's the same kind of Tempest volume test suite that you would run for any other driver, but in this case it runs. So it's basically a full integration test.
Okay, do we have the URL for that CI and all that? Plus,
Yes.
we need to make sure other existing CIs are working with that particular patch too.
There was
That's what
Mellanox
concerns me.
CI in the past, but I need to check it if it up and running.
There are a few fiber channel. All right, so we have to make sure they're using the connector. All right, let me I may send something to the mailing list to everyone who's got a. Because I think
Yes.
I shared the same thing when I saw the code changes in there. I was expecting some stuff would be added, but there's been a lot moved around.
Yep.
So we do need to make sure that anyone currently using the connector hasn't broken. And I don't know for sure that we have CI tests that are actually testing that out. So I'll look into that and then send something to the mailing list.
Okay, cool.
Okay, that would be great feedback for us too about the changes to the connector.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right, and I see you've put the results link. Let me put that in the meeting too. Okay, and thanks, Yvonne. So, all right, the Mellanox CI is using that. I'll go take a look at that. All right, that's good. So we can make sure, hopefully it's responding.
It for sure, but I need to check it if this information up to date.
Okay. Right. All right, I'll go see if I can find a recent log of that thing and see exactly what it's running. Okay. All right, any other all right. Okay, I know. All right, Eric, real quick. Eric's, what's the status of the Mypy stuff? I owe you a review on like a big patch, and I just haven't done it. But it's not just me.
I can't hear you, Eric. I see you talking. Can't hear you.
Eric sometimes has trouble with the Blue Jeans cooperating with his laptop, and this might be one of those times.
How about now?
Now. Yeah, that's good.
I gotta reconfigure this thing every day. It's the whole whatever. Anyway, Mypy patches. We haven't landed any patches yet that had annotations. Some of these, the initial set that I kind of was using as the base to get this started, are getting to like 6 months old now. So I'm not sure what people need to actually do something with this. But if you want motivation for it, during this meeting, we just had a Ceph bug filed against the RBD driver that could have been prevented if we had been using these in the RBD driver. So
Okay,
okay.
that's good incentive. All right. Yeah, okay. So the official position of the Cinder project is that this is an excellent idea and it should be implemented. So it's a matter of reviewing. So let's, yeah.
Should we bump the priority after we get these drivers in?
I think we can try that. I think it's been, so the sticking point has been, so Eric put up a bunch of patches and there's not like 100% coverage of using Mypy. And so people have gotten stuck on, well, let's add it for all the lines that are not covered. And then, right, that means more stuff. And it makes sense from the standpoint that I don't know how likely people are to go back and continue on this effort once the initial patches are landed. Although on the other hand, if bugs keep popping up where you hit the code that's not protected by this. So I don't know what to do. So I mean, I think having partial coverage of this is better than not having any coverage at all, and having it in at least partially in a lot of files is going to make it easier to increase the coverage. So yeah.
So I can churn out a whole lot more coverage pretty quickly, but I didn't want to pile a bunch more patches on before people landed any at all, because I'm not sure that if we can't land 2 or 3 patches, I don't know what's going to happen if I submit 20. And it gets kind of, you have to do them in somewhat of a timely manner or they end up in merge conflicts with everything. Like the volume manager patch, which has a good bit of coverage for the volume manager, will conflict with like 20 patches that are under review right now, because that's just what happens when you change that many lines of code in an interesting area of Cinder. So it actually, if you try to do too much in big chunks, it gets harder to actually land it, unless we're going to like pick a day and say this is the day we're going to merge it. And if we did something like that, we could do, we could plan it out. But with an open-ended review, the bigger it gets, it'll just end up in conflict with everything if it just sits there.
Yeah, now we did try that, having the 1 day thing, but maybe that was too soon because people were sort of still working their way through. So let's see, the mid-cycle's in 2 weeks. All right, well, all right, I know everybody hates this, but we're just about out of time. Let's think about the best strategy for this, and we'll discuss it next week. So the 2 possibilities are current patches, partial coverage, merge, and move on, or have a day. See, with the day, we're not going to be adding the coverage. So I guess the question is, would people prefer to work on it over the next 2 weeks on their own, or should we just have a day, all come together, and just have a code fest? Let me post that to the mailing list and see what people think. And I can also include the topic link that Walt requested, so you can find all the stuff. But yeah,
it's in the Etherpad.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, all right, we have to end. Yeah, all right, so let's get the Walt's driver in, Kioxia, reviewed so we have a better understanding of the status of it over the next couple of days, and then we can get back to normal work. But let's make this a priority, because otherwise all Eric's time's wasted trying to solve merge conflicts with this stuff, and we don't get the benefit of actually having it in the code, which would be nice. Okay, sorry we didn't get to Lucian's question about the Windows RBD support. He's got it working, so that's the next thing to review. I don't think that's a new driver or anything, so it doesn't an extension. Okay, let me end the meeting so Horizon can get started. Okay. All right, thanks everybody. I'll go ahead and stop the recording now.